Namaste, friends. Happy Hanna here, reporting on our podcast today. Another solo episode. Surprise, surprise. We had some rearrangement happen, so I will I will record another episode with all of you and talk about things that we discussed last time. Maybe elaborate a little bit, and also we'll talk about um, yoga therapy. And I hope that it is clear that when I talk about myself and my own story, I don't really mean it to be like, I don't mean to focus everything on myself, but I do it for two reasons. One, otherwise, it's going to sound like a lecture. If I just talk theory and facts, it might not be so easy to follow. So I like to put in real life examples. And as I'm only authorized kind of to use my own self and my own story, um, then I will use myself as an example. But it is also, I'm wanting to invite all of you to think about how this obviously applies to you and what you can hear in it and what could be something that is kind of relatable and useful to you. But the reason I'm talking about myself is that I want to make examples and make it relatable and more personal. And I hesitate doing that because, first of all, I don't want it to be about me, but also, some of the things are private and I don't know how relatable they are. But I still choose to do this, hopefully making it more valuable to you. And the second reason I do it is, I guess I mentioned it already, so that it's not just a lecture. So I can use myself as an example. And I want you to listen with what you can recognize in your own life and in the tendencies of your own mind and your heart and your behaviors in the things that I share. And I will try to make everything. What I mean here is that I will obviously talk about grief because that was one of the biggest tragedies of my life, but it's also it's not only grief that works in these ways. Any life transition or a past thing that is still alive in us can be have similar kind of avenues in our lives. So I want you to know that this is what I've been thinking about. As I was walking outside, there is a wonderful winter wonderland outside, and it's minus 20 degrees and it's been snowing tonight. And I went for a quick walk, hence my rosy cheek. My natural beauty comes straight from the minus degrees from outside, as I don't wear any makeup. And I was walking really fast right before this call, thinking about us coming together and talking about yoga and life and our integration of what has happened and who we are becoming. And I was thinking about it when I was walking. It was very it's tricky to walk in the snow because it's a little bit loose because it just landed. So there's like this kind of, I don't know, a little bit of snow on the sidewalks. And it's slippery to walk. It takes more energy, kind of like if you've ever tried running on a beach, very quickly you notice that it's smart to run close to the water where the waves had made the sand very kind of thick and compact. So walking in the snow with all the winter gear, sweating, trying to be on time and wanting to build up energy for us coming together, I was thinking about how the extremes are so similar. The extreme cold with a lot of snow, with a sandy beach, how our walking paths might be different, but there are similar dynamics in our walk on the beach, on the snow, and how beautiful we are when we can be present to our walk, to our steps, and to what we carry with us, right? So today I wanted to talk about Yoga therapy. Because I mentioned on the last podcast episode how yoga and therapy have been very deeply ingrained in my system after my big traumatic loss that I experienced when I was 31. And then I also shared towards the end of the podcast, I think I shared about how the best thing I've ever done is the therapy training. And it feels like, for the longest time, yoga was the biggest discovery because it helped me map the world. And now psychology, I've found it even a kind of an added next level tool because it goes very much into depth in naming and educating me about what happened. It kind of helps me see what happened and how I responded and how I might see that in others and how I see that in my own yoga therapy work and how I might use that walking forward, either on the sandy beach or in the snowed in sidewalks in Canada. And so I will use the example of grief a lot because that's what happened to me, but we could redefine loss in many ways. And I see this in a lot of my clients and my own therapist when I was sharing that I am now writing a dissertation on grief. And she said, like, yeah, Hanna, everybody's grieving all the time. And I was surprised to hear her say that because I kind of always feel a little bit like you noticed at my opening of this podcast, I feel very self-conscious about grief. I understand that it might be, for some listeners, it might be feeling like I never lost anyone. I don't struggle with grief the way you might have. And that's why I want to redefine loss in that actually I can see it's kind of like trauma, no matter what the reason, what the origin, it has similar ways of presenting and also of like what it does to us and how we can treat it, so to say. So loss can be any loss. It could be any life transition where there's a before and an after. So maybe empty nesting or even I don't know, any let's say a health issue or an organ, like you notice you can't have babies or that it's difficult to have babies before you had a certainty or an envisionment for your life that this is what I'm going to do with my life and these are my dreams. And it might be feeling like your dreams are taken away from you. That could be a life transition that actually causes grief as well, processing of what's happened, right? Divorce, loss of a career, even thinking about, dealing with the aftermath of being brought up in a chaotic home, an alcoholic home, for example. So these could be, a sense of like a loss of innocence could be there that has an impact on us. And whether we've had the opportunity to name it or explore it, it could be something that a little bit colors our world and our place in it and the roles that we see ourselves having and maybe a loss of something that was. So the organic let's jump to the conclusion. The organic resolution of grief is could be, I forget who said this. It's from a book. Some author said it, and I apologize, I can't remember it. I use it a lot, but it is to remember with love instead of pain. So to be able to honor and acknowledge the life transition or the event that happened and not be triggered by it in kind of involuntary ways that makes you have involuntary reactions. So the complete, let's say, recovery from loss can have a lifelong impact to us, living a fulfilling, happy life, having full agency. Agency means that I took my power back and I'm still connected to the memory, to the before life, in ways that are flexible, and that I've been able to integrate it. That means I'm able to live in a relaxed body. And yogis now will have big aha moments. And I love the idea of living in a relaxed body. What does that mean? And that can be a gradual awakening, a practice of ours. All yogis here know what it's like, the moments that we live in a relaxed body. And a lot of therapy today, psychotherapy and otherwise, even doctors now prescribe the relaxation response, um, mindfulness, breathing. There's so much research now that we know that the science of relaxation is where it's at. And when we think about relaxation, it doesn't only mean the body, because the body and the mind, as we know as yogis, they're deeply interconnected. So if I have a relaxed body, I have a relaxed mind, right? It's not jumping, it's not triggered, it is aware. It's like there's an observer. And in yoga philosophy, we talk a lot about the discernment and the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. In the Yoga Sutra, we learn that, right? We're not we're not agitated, right? Everyone's looking for peace and letting go. And oftentimes, because we are so cognitive, we forget about the body. What does it mean then for the body? And how is the body also part of our brain? Because it's tied together with the nervous system. So the way we use our brain will have an impact on our body. And we know this from, if you think about a loved one and they come home and you can recognize their silhouette before they open the door, or the way they take their shoes off. That's how they move. That's their body language. That's unique to them. And it is learned, the way we move, just like our speaking. The fact that I can speak English to you right now is learned. I wasn't born this way. And so is my body language. It's something that is an extension of me. And it's interesting how little maybe we give credit to the body, actually, in terms of just normal general life. We're just assuming that everything functions. And the moment it doesn't, that's when we go to the doctor. And of course, now there's a huge wellness industry that proposes all kinds of techniques for longevity and, theories on which nutrition plan is the best and what diet to follow. And we become our own experiment. So when we are looking at healing and living a full and integrated life, then we want to have both the past and the present and the future and the mind and the body in a state of kind of like soft relaxedness, so that we can bend so we don't break. A lot of yogis use that analogy. So a relaxed body is kind of like, it could become our new mindfulness practice, is to notice when and what part of my body isn't relaxed and what the impact of that is for my mind. And so we know then that it's possible to recover and gain back our energy and our spontaneity and our sense of agency. Because when something traumatic happens, it feels like we're powerless. And when that experience becomes real in our body, it kind of stays in the body for quite a while. And that's why in trauma informed yoga, we practice agency, meaning you decide if you take down dogs or down dog or child's pose. We're trying to like re-educate our nervous system and our body and our mind, reestablish a connection of like, hey, this is my space. And I actually do have a say, and I'm not a victim of my triggers. Because that's what happens when something interferes the peaceful, relaxed body and the peaceful, relaxed mind. It traumatizes it. It disrupts business as usual. So we practice this, it becomes part of our yoga practice. And a lot of yogis come to yoga looking for a relaxed body, but we might not word it in these ways that I am today. And I'm wording these things in this way today because it's been extremely enlightening to me during all these years to start actually being really precise in my language around my own experience, because then that has helped me realize like, oh, I wasn't aware that, I am in anxiety, that my breathing got shorter because we get hijacked. Right? So if we look at the cycle of grief or the cycle of any emotion, because grief is a perceived threat. It's not that it isn't real, but it's not happening right now. Like I'm not losing my husband right now. I might have a threat and fear for it. Those are triggers, but it's not happening right now. But it has a deep impact on me. It's a perceived threat. And so is any other worry. It's not happening right now. But we are living as if our nervous system, our brain, our body is living in a state of threat and constriction involuntarily. And we might not be aware of it until it's safe to explore it. So maybe a little bit of distance, maybe a safe environment, safe relationship, physical safety, whatever resemblance of safety we can muster. That's where we can begin to look at the cycle of emotion. And it's natural and normal and needed to have cycles of emotion, energy that rises in our body and in our awareness. It's like this bell curve, right? We notice something happens, the energy intensifies. Let's talk about grief as an example. We become aware of the loss, we think about it, our whole body kind of responds to it. Maybe there's some tearfulness, and then we let it out, and then it calms down, and the wave comes down, and we come back to relaxation, recovery. And that's normal. The cycle of it's normal to have a response to a loss. The trickiness is when it becomes involuntary and we get kind of stuck in the cycle of the triggers, like an involuntary memory, an intrusive memory. Say San Pellegrino. You guys notice I often drink bubble water from Italy. Well, that's because I'm lucky to have access to it. We have a shop in town that sells it, and I like it, but I could associate it with Italy and my husband when we had lunch on a beautiful, I don't know, May in a cafe like we often did, and we had bubble water, and I could have another cycle of grief show up. Today I don't anymore, and we'll talk about why later, but those are the triggers that could build up energy in our body, a memory of something, whether it's internal or external. It could set in motion this cycle of energy. And so how do we deal with these cycles is, of course, in yoga, anyone who's taken any training in nervous system management has heard about the idea of the window of tolerance. So when the trigger or the emotion doesn't get out of hand, I don't get angry or worked up or tearful. If I stay in my window of tolerance, means I can handle it. I can feel the emotion and acknowledge it, and then live it and process it, and then it fades away. So how do we process, for example, grief? How do we get from remembering with pain to remembering with love? And this could be relevant for anyone who, might be processing any past losses or even thinking about future losses. Like the guest that was supposed to be here today, she is an incredible yogi from Finland. I was on her podcast, so then I thought she could be on ours today. She's writing a book about her parents passing away, and I thought that was such a relevant. Her parents have terminal illness diagnosis, both of them, and she's writing about it, and she has a podcast about it, and she discusses then a kind of what I would say like a possible future grief cycle. So thinking about how do we go from remembering with pain to remembering with love. And it's kind of simple in a way, like the theory is simple. Bill Warden wrote an incredible book. I can link it here under the show notes later. But what he says, there's like certain tasks for mourning, for processing loss. But the simple kind of actions are twofold. One is accepting the loss and then processing the pain of grief. And these things sound really easy, but drawing from my own example, it took me so many years, more years than I would like to admit, or if I had known it in advance, how long it was going to take for me to just even accept the fact that this happened to my children. I would not be, so happy. I was not happy to know how hard it was, how long it took to accept. It was so hard. I was so stuck with the question of why. If I ask why, it means I'm not ready and willing to just shrug and say, well, he's no longer here. And in fact, that wasn't the way I was able to accept it. I had to create a new relationship with all of the different parts of myself, my life, my relationship to everyone, because my world didn't exist anymore. And also, I had to create a new relationship with my loved one who no longer is here. And that can sound a little intense in that, for example, it's really important for me to distinguish that my children do have a father. They have a father. They had a father. And he was Norwegian. He was tall. He was amazing. He was smart and very tolerant and an incredible man. And I can see him in my children, right? I can now have almost like a spiritual relationship with the fact that what he would have said, maybe, right? And it doesn't make me cry anymore. It doesn't make me not accept the fact that now I have to have a relationship with a ghost or with an idea, because I'm not going to get a text message from him. How many years I spent in wanting to accept it, but not really being able to. Because then I thought, what does it say about me? But here's one other, before we go to the acceptance or the process of the pain. Trauma blocks love and connection. And what heals trauma is love. So my husband died. It blocked me from feeling connected and loved. And the thing that did heal my trauma was love. So how that sounds like an paradox, like impossible equation. So how do we then soften into love when there's a block that is the trauma? So that's a painful process. So Bill Warden says that in order for us to move from remembering with pain to remembering with love is to accept the fact that this happened. Another example, we grew up in a difficult family. Accepting it doesn't mean I let go of it, I'm over it, it's in the past, because that is something that formed who I am today. So I will always carry it in me. It will always have an impact on me. How can I accept that and respect that about myself? Because we would rather not lean into something uncomfortable. We would rather avoid dealing with it because it's painful. And we might think, oh, what does it say about me that I'm somehow, there's deep shame sometimes when we are talking about loss, not just as a grief, but loss of health, the previous self. It's going to make me more, say I had a diagnosis, it's going to have an impact on me, right? I might make different choices than somebody else because of my past health issue. And then depends on my capability of accepting that, this new life, this new opportunity at life, however I word it, right? So working with the acceptance of loss is one task. And then the processing of the pain is the other way to start remembering with love. So that's tricky. And we know from like trauma and PTSD that there's memories, intrusive memories, or smell, or a situation, or a dream at night that could trigger the pain again. So that means we got to just hold it and work through it and learn how to relax the body. and it's really important to narrate as well, to share about it with, in a safe relationship. I love this saying about taking healthy risks with safe people. Open yourself up and discover and show something about yourself. And that's how the relationship always keeps deepening, if there is this ability of processing things together, being able to hold each other's pain without the avoidance instinct, like, oh, let's not go there. Because we think that something uncomfortable might last forever. That's what I thought when my husband died. I thought, if this is how my future is going to be, this amount of pain, physical pain, if this is my destiny, I don't know that I can do this. I'm not sure I can survive this, honestly. And I knew I had to because of my little babies and because of my own sake too. What the hell? I got mad at life. And that's healthy because that moves energy. If I stayed mad, that would have been trickier. There were times where I was mad for too long, and I bless the soul of my mother-in-law who had to bear with me through that, and all my loving friends who dared to be in my vicinity. It wasn't easy. It wasn't pretty. And it still sometimes shows up, but now I can name it. I can easier accept it. I can process the pain. So the task of grief is not to say goodbye. It is to say hello to a new world. So think about a life transition, maybe a diagnosis, It's saying goodbye to the old careless world that you lived in and saying hello to a new insecure version of world. How can I learn to live with this and still be spontaneous and have access to my dreams? Right? So it's integrating the memory. And if it was a person, then we include them into our future and our present moment. We re-engage in that relationship. And if the memory stays kind of intrusive, then that means we still have work to do. And sometimes I ask myself that, and I notice the environments in which the memory becomes intrusive. Like when my in-laws died, the process of burying them and going to Norway was very triggering. I had a lot of involuntary crying and insights and seeking of safety in a world where what I had thought of my kind of foundational family since my 20s was kind of withering out. So some circumstances might be more, bring up another cycle of grief, another cycle of energy that intensifies in us. And then if we are able to process it, and sometimes we aren't, sometimes it's a longer process, sometimes it takes a bit longer, sometimes it takes the help of a good friend or a therapist and relaxation techniques and social engagement, because we are multi-layered beings. So when we are able to live in a relaxed body, we kind of enable the self-healing system that we are. All of the answers, as we know, are in the self, in our own. We all have access to it in certain circumstances. But what are triggers? What are stressors? What are intrusive thoughts? What is the perceived threat that we can feel in the body? So I know I've been talking a lot about like painting you a picture of all kinds of theories and how it played out in my life, but I want kind of I want to kind of explore with you somatically what the perceived threat, for example, feels like, or what love feels like. So for a moment, let's kind of connect with your own physical sensations. So take a deep breath in and exhale through your mouth. Now feel your body wherever you are. Kind of feel your toes from the inside. If you're sitting, feel the chair or whatever you're sitting on, your couch, feel it underneath you. Maybe you're driving, feel the back of your car seat. And then think about a moment when you get startled. Are you the kind of, I'm easily startled. Like I'm so deep in my thought in the kitchen, for example, that when my son comes in, I go always like, ugh, and he knows this. So he's like wanting to like not startle me, but it kind of always happens. Or think about if you're scared of dogs or snakes or spiders. Think about a moment you see one. And now notice how your body responds to that. Is there any constricted muscles when you think about startling? I notice I pull my arms towards my rib cage, and then I kind of my spine reaches up, and it's like I wake up a little, kind of like if the alarm went off on my phone. Oh, is it time to go? That's how our body responds to being startled. Okay, so now take a deep breath in through your nose again. Let the startledness go, relax into your body. Yeah. And then let's switch gears. visualize someone you love, or if you have a cat or a dog, or if you had one, think about how cute they are. How soft is their fur? Or if you have a child when they were really tiny, notice when you think about them, what does that feel like in your body? Does it feel like your muscles relax, or maybe they tense a little and then they relax? Maybe your heart kind of expands a little. Notice if your eyes would smile when you think about love. What does love feel like in your body? So these are somatic cues that your body is constantly speaking. You know how in the beginning we talked about how we all have like our body language? And yogis know this very well. When they take a pigeon pose, they notice the initial, like, ooh, here we go. This is going to be a hip flexing situation. And then we expand a little, we exhale, we let our body kind of soften. And as we do that, in a very short period of time, the sensation of pain, depending on how intense it is, lets go a little bit. So that is our way of consciously relaxing the muscles. But most of our days, we walk around involuntary constricting our muscles. And that's what I mean when I say that the threat response is kind of instinctual, because the brain is trained to always scan for problems. That's called a negativity bias. So in my life, that could look like looking for health issues in everyone that I love. If somebody has sniffles, there's a part of me that is alarmed. Even if I can play it cool, yep, there's a part of me that is monitoring, thinking, because my husband had the sniffles and then the virus attacked his nervous system, and in a matter of hours, he was gone. So a part of me has that fear installed. So I need to navigate that and hold that and remember that and relax and know when to call the doctor and when we can wait it out. But my muscles are involuntary constricted, maybe if I have a sense of threat. And as yogis, we practice this a lot. When we do pranayama, when we do yoga, I'll always ask my students, do you notice your jaw? Notice the space between your eyebrows. Because that's where we often kind of, when we're thinking hard, we pull the eyebrows together, or we press the teeth together. So I might tell them to open their mouth. And these kind of interrupt the let's say the relaxation, intentional relaxation interrupts that threat response somatically, using the body. Somatically means we use the body to impact the mind. Right? So some of us don't feel anything. Some of us are feeling numb. And what do we do then? We can then look into polyvagal theory by Stephen Porges. If there's a constant state of numbness, it's a defense system that we manage our feelings with. And when a person can't use them, when we shut down, it means that we're overwhelmed and we can't really connect. And that means that the system to be in relationship is not available. It's offline. So if we can't connect, the nervous system is in an involuntary kind of state. And we can be in mobilization, avoidance, aggression. And when we can't go back to safety, what feels safe, then there's this constant state of activation. And that's when we shut down. We dissociate. And it means that we're not able to feel. There's a sense of numbness. And sometimes we can't feel our body sensations because we're not used to it. So that's why we do yoga, and it's a gradual awakening to the present moment and mindfulness. And oh, this is what breathing feels like. We're used to kind of to the body functions. We're used to the constrictions of our muscles because that's how we talk. That's how we operate in the world. This is our normal coping mechanisms. And then we come to yoga and we're asked to feel things. And we're like, well, I can't really feel much. And it could be because we're not trained to feeling things. And sometimes it is because it's so threatening that we don't know what to do with it, how to deal with it. And we dissociate. We leave the body. We leave the relationship. And what can we do then? We need to do two things. If we're in the states of numbness, we again practice relaxation. And then we also engage in like a moderate engagement in any type of activity, walking, talking to people. We're kind of climbing out of the shutdown. So it's a really good idea to go for a walk. If you feel, or like do a powerful yoga class where you use your muscles and you activate and try to bring yourself back online. So it means we need to practice relaxation techniques, which might be a little counterintuitive to someone who isn't really feeling, who's a little dissociated, but also to be able to re-engage and create relationships intentionally. And it might be the last thing we want to do. And this in order to avoid being in this involuntary threat response that numbness can be. And that's how a lot of trauma happens, that we're not aware of the amount of weight that we carry as we walk through life. And also, we don't know that it's normal, that life transitions will do a number on most of us. And it's not a criticism that you didn't manifest well enough, or you didn't pray enough, or you didn't have enough healthy food. I didn't meditate enough. That's the trap in the wellness world, that we start blaming ourselves for completely natural responses to threat. Whether the threat is perceived or real, it'll have an impact on how much access we have to spontaneity, to our own energy, to our own sense of self. So we're looking for a state of congruence where the inside feelings and their outer expressions are in sync, they match. That we don't have to push things down, and we don't have to be exploding because we're so mad. The journey to holding ourselves and our life experiences with respect, the younger version of myself, that there isn't any shame in my past or in my upbringing or in what I did and what decisions I made. Imagine being in a relaxed body and being fully integrated. That's what we do in yoga therapy. That's the work of yoga therapy. It's yoga therapy is for those who might want to have a safe relationship with a therapist where they can explore this and practice this. And so what is post-traumatic growth? Let's first take the steps to post-traumatic growth. First, supportive relationships, feeling safe, that we have people we can turn to and who can listen to us without anxiety, without projection, that they can just kind of receive us. Because the avoidance, most of us want to avoid threats or the sensation of unpleasant things. So we can't, if your child comes and says, I've been bullied, a lot of parents will go crazy because that is so painful. And then they attack the school and the other child and they launch into a war. And it's understandable. Yes, you need to help your child and you need to take it seriously. But can you hold that child's experience before you launch into attack? Can you listen without anxiety? Can you be that person for someone? We all need safe relationships like this, and we can create them. Then we need a relaxed body. So that would be our step 2. Softening the muscles, the jaw, the breath, and the space to tell our story. It is integration. The fact that I can speak about this means I have integrated the challenges of the loss, right? And that I can remember with love. So that leads to post-traumatic growth. Think about it. So it's kind of like we talked about using our problems as tools. That means I can hold both the difficult aspect of what happened and myself and my response to it and create something new, re-engage in meaningful relationships. It's a positive change that post-traumatic growth is a positive change that you experience. It's like I integrate the result of the struggle. If it was a major life crisis or a traumatic event, right? So that I'm not pulled with involuntary reactions. And when it happens, when I have an involuntary reaction, whether it is just tensed muscles or crying or aggression or numbness, I am aware and I know that I can work with that. Right? I can integrate that. I can process it. Right? And that's why I think a lot of people look to yoga because it's full of relaxation techniques. And it's full of philosophy and yoga psychology. It helps us navigate the life transitions and find maybe a higher meaning in it. That's where spirituality might be a helpful tool, but spirituality won't help if you're bouncing around in your triggerings, because then it's going to be that kind of black and white, kind of not integrated process of, oh, if only I meditated a little more. Whereas we're looking to hold ourselves humbly and with respect, kind of like you would anyone else. So perceived threats, we confront them with a relaxed body. We offer ourselves humbly to the processes. So then when we have a relaxed body, we have less distress. And it's so easy to say and so not easy to implement. And people only change when they want to. When you get the internal motivation that I want more ease, I want to feel empowered. I want to take my power back. I don't want to live in shame. I want to find peace. That a lot of people are asking, how do I let go? Here's how you let go. By accepting that you can't really let go, but it won't have to be the only, like sometimes we're like labeling ourselves or worried about being labeled, right? I remember at like daycare pickups and I was thinking like, they probably think like, oh, there comes the widow, right? Now I'm proud to be a widow. It was hard work to get here. It's hard work to be a widow, right? I can hold that with tenderness and have empathy and work my way to a relaxed body. Notice how quick your body responds to with avoidance, which constriction is, isn't it? Isn't tension like, oh, don't come into me. Don't get integrated into me. Bad things. Huh. Remember what love feels like. It's so funny, right? Like if we talk about post-traumatic growth, for me, to make a concrete example, the way I'm able to love because of the loss I experienced is more intense, more all-encompassing, less conditional, very unconditional, because I know that I'm going to lose you. I know there's not going to be an easy outcome. It's tricky then to love people when you know that at the end of this, there is death. There was a time when I was so mad at this. I was like, either people will die or they walk away. Right? What's the point of love? I remember when I got Coco, the dog, our little Boston Terrier, he was a puppy. And I remember walking him and I got startled at my own thinking, but I remember I was outweighing how smart would it be now to get attached to this little gorgeous little thing? When is it going to die? I remember asking myself, I wish I knew, when is it going to die? And then I have to embrace life and its uncertainty and ease into loving him, which I did. And now he's really old and I'm middle-aged. And I'm thinking, I'm seeing his gray hair and his muscles are like withering. And I read about menopause and the importance of weightlifting when I look at him. And I know he's not going to be here forever. And I know I'm going to miss his presence. So I'm already envisioning how I'm going to process when he's no longer my companion. He would be in here if he could. He's always everywhere where I am. So how do we harness or live our growth, saying that we use our problems as tools? Yeah, then we love really intensely, less afraid to show it and express it. And yeah, it's going to have a cost, but loneliness has a cost too. Isolation has a cost too. Taking a risk with safe people, healthy risks with safe people, How do we do that? What does that look like for you in your relationships? Are you a safe person to take healthy risks with? Do people feel safe around you? Or are you constantly involuntary triggered, feeling threats? These are deep questions that, I think about like spiritually, like spirituality really is feeling unconditional love, isn't it? Connecting with a sense of higher power, whatever kind of attributes and belief systems or theories we choose to apply. It means being open to incredible amounts of love and transcendence and bliss and believing in the good, like kind of like I'm putting my money on God or the universe. My energy is going in that direction because that's where I want to invest. That's what I want to live. So, can we apply that then? How can we receive and be in that love? Well, probably only with a very relaxed body. Like when I think about a mad nun, I don't know that I automatically think they have a highway connection to God. When I think about a loving individual, whether they're a nun or a monk or a person, normal person or abnormal person, what does it feel like to transcend? What does incredible amounts of love feel like? And can we extend that outside of our meditation, outside of our mantra practice, outside of our ashram bliss? How do we carry that into life? Well, by being mindful around our own, kind of taking responsibility for our own patterns, our own perceived threat response, the stressors that we maybe are not even conscious around. And that's why in yoga, I think there's a lot of work on consciousness and unconscious responses. So different theories in psychology, in science, in religion will offer their own solutions to this. But it's the same thing. And finding words for it, I find is very empowering and liberating. And to close off, we do this work as yogis all the time. And that's why we're a community where we create those relationships where we listen to each other without anxiety. We meet every week on this call, on yoga teacher training calls. Any excuse we can make, we'll come together to listen to each other and share with each other, kind of like our notes from our lives, our discoveries, in order to breathe and live together in relaxed bodies. So if you're listening to this and want to experience that, join us. And to those who are already here, thank you for co-creating what Happy Jack Yoga is. It's because of all of us. It's not because of me and Jack. It's because all of us, we contribute and we bring our energy and our hearts together. So namaste, friends. Thank you again for listening. Next week, we'll finally have Happy Jack together, and he's probably going to bring us an avalanche of bliss from India. And I cannot wait to hear it and share it with all of you. Namaste, friends.